Well, hello everyone. Hope everybody's doing well. I got on the bench. This is that the internal electronics from that Sparton 301 AM receiver, and I've shot video up to this stage, tearing this apart and doing some troubleshooting and changing out a few things. And I usually take, as a lot of times when I'm in the shop, I shoot video, and I take the video and I put it on these terabyte drives and I save it. Well, I found the footage where I took everything out of the radio and tore it apart and look at it, and I'll show that right after this segment. This was shot months and months and months ago, and there was another segment where I went in and did some troubleshooting on the power supply and different things, and replacing some burnt resistors, and I can't find that footage, so some of that's lost. But anyway, that's how it goes sometimes. When you're doing so many different things, it's hard to keep up with it. Hey guys, we're back on the old Sparton 301, and what we need to go ahead and get done is get all the electronics removed. Now, I had already removed the speaker, and these wires are supposed to be color coded, but they're faded. So as you can see, I have stuck numbers on it with a little label, and I stuck a label up here, so it just makes it easier. I'll see if I can re-dye these back the original colors. And if you noticed up here, the rivets that hold these eyelets on are color coded. We got yellow, orange, green, and red. But you can see all the screw heads in this whole unit are rusty, so they got to be taken out, cleaned, polished, and put back in. Everything is already unwired from previous messing with it. But something I did do right after I did the first video, I took the cover off the tuner and went ahead and soda blasted it. Now I need to just give it a light sand. I didn't remove none of the paint on the inside. I'm going to just polish that up. I want to keep everything as close to original, but you know, the top of it was so rusted up it had to be soda blast. And the same thing with the amplifier and RF section. I got it out. So like I said before, to get this out, all we have to do is just slide this unit out, which is very easy. And you see the whole unit just comes right out. Next thing we need to do is remove that speaker. And the speaker is held in by 4 screws. And they are tight, so I'll go ahead and loosen those nuts up. It was amazing that about every bolt on the bottom of the radio unit was loose, and there's one that is missing. Now, they use standard hex head bolts on this. There's also one of these washers. You see this washer is not just a flat washer that's missing on the radio unit. So I'm going to have to fabricate a new one, and that'll be interesting to do, but I don't see it as a problem. One thing I'll probably go ahead and do is take as much of the metal off as I can and go ahead and start the restoration on it, soda blast it, and prime it and paint it. Now this speaker should slide right off, and it does. Well, that's all the electronics out of the cabinet, and you can see the speaker that I was telling you about in the other video. The cone is perfect. There's no dust cap, but you can see the surround is just gone, and all this is a it's like a cloth material, and you can see just how deteriorated. It's like cloth with a little bit of foam on the bottom of it, so that's going to have to be replaced. So I have to get all the gasket off. You can see there's only a couple pieces. This piece that was up here is out and gone. I didn't look to see if it was still in the radio, but we'll have to get all this cleaned off and get all this stuff off the cone itself. Like I say, the cone is perfect. No problem. We'll have to put a new surround on that. Now you can see the grill cloth looks just about perfect. It's just faded and will need to be cleaned. I don't see no need of replacing it. It's not wrinkled up. We'll just have to get it out and try to clean it, maybe re-dye it back the original color. Okay, so that's the front of it when it's out of the unit, and doesn't look too bad. To get the 3 units off, it's simply a matter of removing all these nuts from the bottom, and you can see these are a square nut. Let me get one of them off here so you can see it. See, that's just a little square nut. I'll probably just make a couple just so that I'll have them, and to replace there's one here on that's missing on the back of the selector. So we'll just make one to go back on it. Alright, so all those nuts are removed from the bottom. I should be able to pull this knob off. And I've already got the faceplate is unwired, as you can see. So we can set that aside. And the rest of the unit will just lift right off the wood. So you got to remember that the selector and the RF frequency and amplifier is tied together with this little whisker that's got to come up out of the way. So you're best to lift these together, then you can pull them apart. So there you can see this little whisker that sticks out. It's just a metal rod, and it's very corroded. And we can pull the amplifier off. You can see the 4 electrolytic caps down in there that's got to come out. Now this thing is going to be a little interesting to get out of this case, because this is a spot welded on the bottom, and all this stuff has to lift up and come out with this big old wire on there. Take the piece of plywood, which is in excellent shape, and again it looks like walnut, so we'll slide that back into the radio case so it can be refinished. Oh yeah, one other thing I want to note. You notice here there's these metal tabs that are mounted, that grounds everything, all 3 pieces together. And here's a look underneath the bottom of the power converter. As you can see, there's mostly just wiring. There's one capacitor here, and there's two resistors here. As far as components, that's all the components that are underneath the bottom side of this. Now again, if you look at the selector unit, the only connections, there's only 3 connections on the whole unit. This is the antenna clip. This is the clip from the transformer or power supply, and the one connection here on the end that ties into the RF amplifier unit. Now when you look at the end, you can see how the there you go, you can see how the dial cord is ran on this thing. There's just a shaft that goes through. These are 2 threaded nuts, and the dial cord is wrapped around this one and goes around the back side, and this one is wrapped around this and goes around the front side. Very unique design. You don't see that made today like this anymore. Anyway, this whole unit's going to have to be taken apart, because you can see this shaft is rusty. All the screws are rusty. Now if you note these capacitors, the tuning part is just a metal band. There's a thin piece of mica under that, and then there's another metal tab that's grounded on the bottom. So again, the design of this thing is just very unique. But we'll have to get all this tore down and gone through. I'm going to attempt to try to get this board out. We'll remove this screw. And again, you can see these screw heads are just rusty everywhere. It would be so nice if the bottom came off. But taking the part's not going to be too much of a problem. The studs on the bottom are welded in place, so they do not come off. All that's got to be cleaned inside anyway. There's a pilot lamp here, but that's only held in place by this one screw. And that pushes right back out of the way, as you can see. Alright, let me check this out and figure out what I got to do to get this thing out. Well, it wasn't quite as difficult as I thought it was. There was a couple of screws on the edges of it that had to come out, and had to remove the tubes and pick it up on this end and slide it out and feed the wire through this piece of paper material here. And you can see there's some standoffs in the bottom that it sits on, and they have a piece of paper insulator in the bottom. But wasn't that difficult to get out. Now as you can see, there are 2 here and 2 here. These are capacitors, and you can see these coil formers are made from wood. So you definitely don't want termites to get into your radio, because they would have a field day. And there's the bottom view, and you can see more wooden coils. Looks like a couple of capacitors here, and there's one mica mold capacitor here. And as far as capacitors, that's about it in this unit. But now that we got this tore apart, we can get it cleaned up, get the tubes checked, and find out just what all is going on in there. So, no, we haven't gotten inside of it yet, but inside here is actually 4 big coils, and each coil is inside its own cavity. You can see some spot welds here on the sides, and what this is, there's plates inside, so each coil is in its own cavity, so it doesn't affect the one beside it. And I thought that's interesting to see, and when we get it tore down, we'll show you that. I've already got all the screws out of this, and the only thing I got to do is desolder this wire from the little whisker here, and I can take the bottom cover off. I don't want to do it right now because that will expose those coils. But the way this metal was made, this type of metal, will actually grow what's called tin whiskers. And it's little whiskers that will come out from this, that's made out of this metallic material that they use, and it's a type of what we call around here in the South pot metal. But it will grow tin whiskers out of it, and those little micro whiskers will come out and touch other components and cause intermittent problems and problems with it shorting out, not working. So all that's got to be cleaned up real good. As you can see, there was a big filter block there. But here's the can for it, and it sits right on that little platform. And this thing was full of foil and wax, and it was 4 different capacitors inside. And after going through all that, taking all that out, that's about it. As you can see, there's 4 capacitors in there. These capacitors are rated for 600 volts. Because you got 600 volts on either side of the high voltage on the main transformer over there. But it comes out to about 400 volts after it's filtered, after it's rectified and goes through the filter. You got about 420 volts on it. So 600 volt capacitors are not bad, and it's either 2 microfarad a piece. I thought about dropping in 2 4 microfarad at 600 volts in series. That will give it more headroom, so if we need to do that, we can. But for right now, that's sufficient. So I had mounted the stuff back on the board, and you know we had did the speaker repair earlier. So and what I wanted to do is just see if this radio will even play at all, if anything is working on it. That kind of lets me know, just how much further we can go on it. Okay, I brought the radio up. I do have an outside antenna on it. I'm hearing some hash out of the receiver. Oh boy. So it is picking up some stations. Don't want to hold it too long, get a copyright hit. What I was doing now, I don't know how much of y'all know about TRF radios, tuned radio frequency. They did it back, different than what they do it today. Back the first TRF radios, each one of these air valve capacitors had to be tuned individually. So when you saw a radio that was TRF, you had a knob for just about each stage. and you had to tune each stage to that frequency to pick up a radio. That was a little bit difficult back in the day, but then they came out with this design where they got all the variable capacitors on one shaft, and it tunes all the stages simultaneously. And what I was doing is just checking across here. That's the first stage, that's the second stage, third stage, and you see it's getting louder and louder in the fourth stage. And what this is telling me here, just by doing that, that we're losing in between the stages somewhere. So I'm going to take my hand away, it's gone. Yep, so somewhere in this tuner mechanism there is something not working. So if we look down here, you can see these metal plates, and there's mica underneath of it, and these are the adjustments to fine tune each stage. This is your antenna adjustment, and then you got an adjustment for each one of these stages. So something in this thing is not making connecting. You can see how the screws are rusty, the shaft's rusty. So we got a bad connections in that tuner stage somewhere. Like I said, you know, the antenna is connected, you see, and it's not really doing anything until I put my hand up. So it looks like all we need to do is just disconnect this and go ahead and shut down the power. Remove our ground wire coming from the power supply board, and there's two nuts underneath that we'll remove, and then we can slide the pin out of the AF amplifier stage. Okay, so if we look at the schematic, you can see that this is our antenna coming in. There's that one capacitor, and it comes down and goes into L1, which is a coil. You can see there's a tunable capacitor here. There's C1, C2, C1. This is still part of C1 over here. This is part of C1. That's part of C1. So these are the 4 capacitors that are variable, that's mounted on the shaft. And then you can see there's a C2, C3, and this is C3. It's funny how they call both of them C3s, but they're 2 separate capacitors. And again, L2 and L1. So this is just a tuned circuit with a trimmer on it. It's all this is. So you can actually put in a signal into this and then monitor the signal on the other side of the coil and tune it for maximum output on those signals and get all of them the same. But somewhere in here through this tuning, and it's probably going to be this variable capacitor or these mica variable capacitors that is causing the problem. I've already removed all the screws out, and I've desoldered this wire that goes to this little, what I call a whisker, that makes contact with the grid of the first tube. So we should be able to get this bottom cover off now. And as all you can see, it's just coils. These wires here have been a little bit squished in this block. And on this side you can see those little micro capacitors. It's just a plate sitting on top of another plate with micro in between them. Real simple design. So what's going on here, you can see these two spring contacts here and here. This is the antenna. This is ground. This gets ground from the power supply unit, and the ground is transferred right into the chassis. Now we get down there and we take a close look. You can see this corrosion around here, so we may be losing some ground there. So what I need to do is get this apart so this can be cleaned. Also on this end here is the rotor shaft, and you can see it's grounded, and then this here makes contact with the rotor shaft, and this is all rusted up. So it's a good chance it's not getting any ground through here. So I'm going to go ahead and take this apart, and all I got to do is just remove these two screws, desolder the wire, and I'll have to get this spring off of this because all that's got to be cleaned anyway. And then I'll remove this screw and we can work that out and clean all this. Okay, I got this capacitor off, and you just see how corroded this. It looks like almost like brass strips. It's hard to tell, it's so corroded. But you know, if you're not getting the ground, the system's not going to work. This is heavily corroded. I'm going to take this spring off, and these actually unthread off the way it's made. The spring will unthread. You got to kick it over to one side and just get one of the little loops under this nub that sticks out, and you can screw it right off. But looking at the unit here, see if I can, you can see that rust down the shaft. So the rotor doesn't even get grounded with so much rust on it like that. I hate to do it, but it looks like I'm going to have to take this whole rotor shaft out. It's not going to be easy, but to properly clean it like it's supposed to be, that means this dowel's got to come off. That's one on this side, and you see that's a threaded fitting here, and there's a threaded fitting on this side. So you got one that pulls this away while that one unwinds, and then when you go the other way, this one is pulling while the other one unwinds. And it has a lock on it, so it won't go but just so far. Okay, I got the tuning mechanism off, and you really can't remove these unless you take these lead balls off. So I'm not going to do that. So what I want to do is just take the dowel off with this still attached to the dowel holder. But unfortunately this appears to be rusted to the shaft. So I'm going to have to put some penetrating oil in there and let it soak, and see if I can get it to come off. Now when I go to put this back together, I'll show you details on how to put it back together. Ain't that interesting taking it apart, so it won't be, you know, too complicated to get back together. Well guys, that was a little bit more than what I anticipated for getting this out. The only problem was the dowel had seized to this shaft. So I had to stand it up on end and use a combination of PB blaster to get down there and help get some of that rust out, and then use a commercial heat gun to heat that center up here. I didn't want to use the small torch because this is old, looks like old pot metal, and I don't know what the melting temperature of this is. I got it up to about 300 some degrees, and using a pliers on this joint to hold it here, and you see what I scarred it up a little bit. But I'll put this in the lathe out there and clean this up real good. Get the end of these shafts about right. But I'm hoping that's going to be the biggest problem that was keeping this thing from working right. But again, you know, as you can see, all these screws are rusty. All that's got to be taken off, and these are little metal clips here that are bolted to that. So anywhere there's metal touching metal, especially when it's different types, you know, there's a chance of corrosion in between them. So all these will need to be taken out. I have to be very careful because this is very fine wire that goes down to these coils. You can just see how small those wires are, maybe. But yeah, all that's got to be taken off one at a time and cleaned up. Now these stators are mounted to, looks like two pieces of phenolic rails in here. So we don't want to upset none of that stuff, you know. We just want to get it cleaned. I wish my ultrasonic cleaner was big enough to at least emerge half of it in. I wouldn't want to put these coils in it with the risk of breaking any wires. So what I'm doing here is taking each one of these leads off. As you can see, I've already got the end plates. I took them off and sandblasted those. Got them real clean. I went ahead and cleaned the ends of this housing. But now what I'm doing is just coming here and removing the two screws from this side. Then I'm laying the wire over. Now you got to remember, one end of the coil is grounded. But what I want to do is check this microcapacitor to make sure it's not shorted. And to do that, now that I got the ground off of it, I can come to either side of the plates and check, and there's no short. If there would have been a short, that means that little thin strip of mica that's inside that capacitor is bad. But so far that's good. Then I'll take my little wire wheel or wire brush and clean both sides of this up and clean that up, and then clean the screws. Alright, now we can work on putting this back together. I got enough of the internal stuff cleaned that it shouldn't be no other problem. Push off these fins. To make sure no trash is gotten down inside of it. And to put this back in, just slide this through here. And we got this little plate. Slides on that end like so. And to take the backlash up, of a little retainer plate that'll go on the back, and there's 2 screws with springs on it that press against it, and that keeps everything this away at a certain torque, so that the plates are spaced evenly. Okay, now we can go ahead and start putting this piece together. The screws screw into this casting or the framework, and there's a reason for that. So once the screws are in there, this plate still can move back and forth, and that's just how you adjust it to get the spacing on the plates right. Alright, now I can take our little retaining plate, drop it under there, get one side on. I can go ahead and screw these on in further. Then we take our little spring and put on one. I'll just go ahead and get this nut started on there. We don't want the nuts tight yet until we get both springs on. Alright, got our other spring started. And that's kind of what it looks like when you get it started. So you tighten up these nuts, and that'll pull the rotor one way, and how you tighten these up will pull the rotor the other way. Alright, pretty much got the rotor spaced out in the stator about halfway. I'll go ahead and drop a little oil on these. Okay guys, I got the signal generator over there set at 0.900 kilohertz, and I've got the signal tracer here. I'm going to do a rough calibration here. Okay, so what I've done, I just peaked this capacitor for the maximum RF out. Now I want to go through, I'm going to just go right on to the end and see if we get any signal through there. capacitor peaked out. And I'm listening to the tone, and I'm watching the little meter on the signal tracer. So it looks like the capacitors were pretty close. Alright guys, got everything stuck back together now. And waiting for the radio to warm up. Seem to be picking up 2 stations. That one is very local. And there's another one there that's way down. And what I got to have is a 1/4-inch nut driver that has a plastic shaft. So I'm going to have to make one of those if I can get in here and tune these coils properly. Because just putting a metal nut driver in it, you see how sensitive it is, and it goes picking up different stations. So and this other station that's loud don't do nothing but play music all the time. At least we know our speaker is working. So I can disconnect the antenna. Hook up the signal generator. Set it for 0.650. I'm going to set it for 1 megahertz. Alright, I got the dial set to 1000, so now we can just see how far the dial is off. About 925. And if we go down the low end, I got it set for 650. So you can see it's closer on the low end of the band than it is on the high end of the band. I really need to make, I'll see if I can make another one of these terminal strips. Let's set it at 550 and see if we can pick that up. 550 is pretty close. Just about spot on. So the band's got to be stretched out a little bit, and that's why I need to make another a tuning stick for those 1/4 inch nuts that's on them adjustments, because you can't do it with metal. There's no way that you can use metal. I just want to see how close to 1500 we can get. 500 is not into the band. Let's try 13. So there's 13 at about 1125. So it's getting there. We just got to get the band stretched out. Okay guys, that's about all the time we have on this today. At least we know where the radio's at now, what it's doing, and what it needs to do. And we'll go ahead and I'll get this thing stripped back down and go ahead and get the chassis painted, get this other sheet work painted. Alright guys, we know where we are now, we know what's going on, and what I need to do next, now that we know that this radio does work, is strip it all back down. I want to get all the stuff off the top of the main power supply and RF amp disassembled, and get that chassis painted, get all this other metal work painted, and go ahead and strip this down and see what I can find to put on here. I think I'm going to try to get a piece of veneer, very thin piece of veneer, and probably some walnut, and cover this with it. I think that would look real good. But you know, hey, 1929 and it is working, so that's a good thing. So with that said, we'll get back on it later on and see what we can get done to it. Once we get this working like it's supposed to be, we can start on the chassis. And I'm sorry about that missing footage, but you know, that's how it happens sometimes. Alright guys, y'all have a good day. I'd like to hear your comments down below, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye now.